As energy depletion drives inflation in the global marketplace, fundamental building materials get more and more expensive. Businesses forced to pay these prices are tempted to skimp on employee payroll as much as they can in order to save money and keep retail prices competitive.
Damn it. These expenses are killing me. I can barely afford my yogurt. Time to cut payroll. Cancel all raises.
This happens just as employees are also dealing with cost of living increases because of said inflation. This leads to labor strife.
How can they cancel raises when cereal has gone up by 20%? This is bullshit.
Oh, little snowflake cannot buy his favorite Crunchberry cereal. I don't give a damn. They can work somewhere else if they are so special.
I am not taking this crap. Time to strike. We will shut this fucker down. Strike.
This labor strife ends up causing more supply chain and transportation issues, which then causes more shortages and even higher prices, creating yet another destructive recursion loop as we head down the energy cliff. Today we focus on a few stories that demonstrate that this phenomenon is indeed taking place, and not surprisingly in some of the most key sectors of our economy. Longshoremen on the West Coast, who fulfill the essential job of offloading cargo from incoming ships, are currently in contract negotiations and have been without an active contract since July 1st, when the past contract expired. While the process had appeared to be going relatively smoothly at first, more and more friction is clearly developing as the negotiations drag on. Last week, a conflict over cold shoring, a process of hooking a berthed ship to shore power, broke out in SSA, Seattle's largest port. Allegedly, the port operator was wanting to allow another union jurisdiction over the job, which the ILWU said violated previous agreements. In response, the Pacific Maritime Association, the association that represents port operators, petitioned the National Labor Relations Board, a move that further irked the ILWU. The he said, she said here isn't really the point, but what is important is that the conflict has already led to reports of union slowdowns on various West Coast ports, and demonstrates that the talks between PMA and the ILWU are getting more strained. In other words, the ILWU, a union which represents over 22,000 longshoremen in 29 ports, is getting much closer to constricting the part of the supply chain bottleneck of which it controls. We have also seen the railroad workers getting closer to labor strife that would also jeopardize the essential supply chain component. And though the media generally has portrayed this conflict as resolved, it is important to note that the strike was averted only for a few weeks so that railroad workers could vote on the proposed agreement. And if the proposal is voted down, we could assume that strikes and shutdowns of the railroads will proceed quite rapidly. The agreement was penned in mid-September, and some of the primary unions involved will not complete their tally until November. Already it sounds like there is enough anger from workers towards their experience during COVID that it might be derailed. And if so, it could be more dynamite in an already battered economy. And in France, we see that there is a strike amongst oil refinery workers. The dispute is over pay, and so far has closed down half of France's refining capacity. And to make matters worse, the government, which has often been the arbiter between unions and the agencies that employ them, is losing credibility in the eyes of some labor groups. At least that appears to be the case recently in the United States. In the wake of Hurricane Fiona, the Biden administration allowed for a British-flagged vessel leaving Texas to stop in Puerto Rico and sell its diesel there by granting a British petroleum ship a waiver to the Jones Act. For those that are not aware, the Jones Act is a 100-year-old law requiring all vessels traveling between U.S. ports to be made in America, flagged in America, and have an American crew. The Biden administration granting a waiver to this act has created anger with the maritime unions. The maritime unions published a joint statement last week which stated in part, We are shocked and outraged at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's decision to issue an illegal, unjustified, and unnecessary Jones Act waiver for a British petroleum tanker that took active steps to ignore and then circumvent fundamental American law. And with both corporate establishments and the governments quickly becoming the focus of ire for workers, these recursion loops are bound to continue to grow, eventually spilling over from union strikes to general civil unrest, like what we saw in Ecuador, Peru, Sri Lanka, and about 20 other developing nations this summer. This could cause general shutdowns and societal instability, and even economic collapse. As predicted under peak oil models, these protests have started in the most vulnerable economies, but are already moving to larger, more robust economies, such as England.
Of workers and a lot of people that are working in this country have had enough. They've had enough of not working full time and not being able to pay their energy bills and not be able to put food on the table.
It is imperative that society understand that what is going on in economies and energy markets is not fundamentally a problem revolving around climate change and ESG responses to it. Rather, this is a net energy problem based in physics. And the sooner we start innovating and adapting with that in mind, the better chance humanity has of surviving this brewing superstorm. Thanks for listening. See you soon. And this is just two quick addendums. Looks like the labor strife is now breaking out in the American food industry. And number two, with all the labor turmoil, the inflation protests, and a global system that is clearly under duress, and with prices of oil and gas almost twice the previous norm, OPEC Plus has announced a cut in oil production of 2 million barrels a day. This is most likely not a choice, but a necessity on their part, and a clear sign that oil is moving from abundant and cheap to scarce and expensive. Stay strong, folks.